Hello and welcome back to Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. We're your hosts. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Sean.
And we are glad you're here. Thanks for joining us. In this podcast, we talk about real sales issues, big and small, for salespeople, selling situations, and sales leadership. Collectively, we have over 50 years of sales, selling leadership, and sales acumen under our belts, and we're here to share a little bit of that with you in the next 15 minutes. We're glad you're here. Enjoy the show. Today, we got a fun one for everybody out there in listening land. And this one probably hits home with a lot of you on how to not only have an effective meeting, but really we want to take that and spin that yarn a little further. What reasons do we have to actually hold a meeting, right? This is beyond the salesperson one-to-one. This is beyond the weekly sales meeting, but why should we have a bigger meeting? Sean?
Yeah, so I love this because I'm a big believer in training, and that's going to be the reason that I'm going to give you why you should have a bigger meeting. So this might be a monthly meeting or a quarterly meeting where you've gotten all your salespeople together. So this is not about the individual deals that you would do in a one-on-one meeting. It's not about maybe the pipeline that maybe you would do on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, but let's talk about that quarterly meeting. The number one thing that you want to do in a quarterly meeting is education. You want to make your team, as the sales leader, as the CEO, you want to make your sales team more effective, more knowledgeable about what's going on. And that's the reason to have a quarterly or bi-monthly, whatever, sales meeting where you got all your team together. You probably are going to invite other sales support resources into that meeting, pre-sales people, if that's applicable for your industry, sales operations people, maybe even order entry will play a part in this meeting as well. So you want to get the entire sales ecosystem together and have an educational conversation. Now, I do need to tell you, don't have this sales meeting just because the quarter came up. Don't waste everybody's time. If you can do it all over Zoom and with a couple quick updates, a well-written email, then that's fine. Then do that. If you don't have anything else to do, then don't have a meeting. The key here is what's happening in your industry. What is happening in your target market? What is happening in your company that you need to get everybody aligned and moving the same direction? So think of having guest speakers come in potentially. Think of working on your sales messaging. Think of understanding what's happening in a particular vertical that you go after. Those types of conversations are what you want to have in that quarterly meeting. And what I want to really push for you on is don't have it be 431 PowerPoint slides, because that is not going to teach them anything. Work on interactive sessions, work on the ability to team up with people that don't typically work together so they can build some camaraderie. That's the beginnings of the thought process of this whole thing. So Kevin, why don't you lead us a little bit from here and give some examples?
I want to first train our minds in. This would be an exercise that a new leader or a seasoned veteran can really lean into, because there's somebody out there in listening land is going, do I have it on-site or off-site? Is it a fly-in? Is it a drive-in? When, where, what, how, why? So high level, make it apply to your industry. Sales meetings are not vacations. I like to use a format called PESTEL for talking about issues, PESTEL. And if you don't know what that means, go look it up. But it's essentially what are the issues your industry might be facing from a number of different angles, like political, legal, economic, environmental, technological. Look up PESTEL separately, but today we're talking about why have a sales meeting? Have a good reason. So what should you get out of it? As a sales leader, having been in this seat, having had quarterly fly-ins or biannual or annual summits, I've led these meetings, I've developed them, and the goal always for me was to help somebody transfer knowledge from someone to them. I want my sales team to be better, more equipped to go out into the market and make a difference with a better value proposition or better insights for their clients or their prospects. At the end of the day, sometimes value propositions are built around insight. If I'm looking for a black ink pen, there's a bazillion black ink pens I can buy. But why do I buy the ones that I buy? They're all my reasons. And I have to have insights around why I buy those as a buyer. Somebody needs to know that about me so that they can speak to my needs in the marketplace. That's probably too simple of an example, but the idea here is that don't just have a meeting just because it's the middle of the year. Have a meeting because you want to improve the buyer experience or the tools that the sales people carry with them to help enrich the buying experience. Sean, why don't we do a best practice, worst practice kind of back and forth? Because there's some doozies we've all seen, and we can help some people avoid some challenges, but also be thoughtful about having their next meeting and maybe something that could be valuable. You want to go pro or con? I'll take the opposite.
Sure. So I'm going to do a best practice. In my opinion, a best practice for a sales meeting where you got your team together is role plays. It kind of pushes all of the practice in. But I've seen a lot of people do a role play inappropriately. So I'm going to take this best practice and I'm going to show the worst parts of it. When you're doing a role play, it's really important that you find something positive about everything that you've done. Role play should be done in with three positions in every role play. You have somebody's going to play a customer. Don't be a jerk when you're a customer. Don't ask really stupid questions, but be competent as a customer, right? So in other words, don't be a pushover for all the questions and everything, right? So be a little bit competent when you're playing customer. When you're playing seller, well, that's what you do every day, so that's pretty easy. So you're going to be selling something. And then we need an observer or observers. I prefer one observer that's truly going to be the observer, and he's going to be a fellow salesperson. If there's other observers, that's fine, but they have to be quiet. They have to be completely quiet during the exercise. Then I want you to you do all three roles. You kind of rotate between all three jobs, right? Observer, customer, a seller. So you rotate between them all. After every one, the salesperson has to say what he did great. And then he says what he did not so great. And then the the buyer says, this is what you did great, and this is what you did not so great. And then the observer says what they think as well. And nobody repeats themselves in the whole process. So you don't have to pile on. So if the guy screwed up, don't say it 2 more times. We all know he screwed up. Let's get to the next one. That whole process works. Everybody else that's also observing that isn't part of the exercise, they're quiet during the whole process. Then when you get the whole group back together, because you've broken out into these groups of 3, now the rest of the people can say, well, this is what I thought went really well. And this is what I thought didn't go well for the 3 people I watched. Don't try to pick on an individual, but instead try to say something positive first. Always try to say something positive first. I thought Joe did this really well. Because that one little thing is enough of an encouragement to then say, but Joe kind of screwed this part up. And that's okay too, right? So we all need to learn. So I think role plays play a big part in being better at a particular skill. And we want to focus it on, I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot here. We want to focus it on one activity, a prospecting activity, opening the door. Maybe it's a closing activity. Maybe it's explaining a new feature of our product that just got introduced. Whatever the case may be, but just one little thing, not the entire sales call, just one little 5-minute interaction. So I took more than 5 minutes to describe that 5-minute interaction. Sorry about that. But Kevin, what do you think about that? And tell me about something that's a bad best practice or not a best practice.
Sure. Well, Sean, I just want to say, please don't apologize, because that was a great example of how to coach for improvement and development. That is one that anybody should be able to take forward to their team. So verbal high five on that one. That was great.
Thank you very much.
The thing that I want to talk about as a bad practice, and we're probably all guilty of this at some point in our careers, is not having enough variation throughout the meeting of learning types. So I'm thinking, if you're just going to present slide after slide after slide, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but your meeting could have been an email. So we've got to mix this up. People learn differently. It's up to us as leaders to meet people where they are and then take them by the arm and lead them to a place where they wouldn't go on their own. If they didn't need that in your organization, we'd have our own quota and we'd be part of the sales team. The bad best practice is only having slides or only having videos or only having one or two ways to teach people. People need stimulus, they need breaks, they need cadence to the meeting to get up and walk around. I mean, there needs to be those components of everybody. So when you're planning these things, plan them for all different types of learners. Because remember, the goal at the end is to have someone improve a skill or skills in this time they're investing, not selling. If they're not selling, it's really, it's a double tax on your team. So do your team a solid. Do them a solid, Sean. Get mixed media in there so they can be more effective in understanding and digesting the learning. Now, you'll have some duds, and that's on us as leaders. We got to try new things, got to push the envelope, but it's okay to have a dud. We have to be okay to fail. The only other thing I would say about sales meetings is be prepared. As a leader, it is imperative. It is an absolute no exceptions kind of rule in my book that we must know about where our sales issues are in our processes, with our individual people, and with their ability to grow as individual producers and individual contributors. We as leaders, one of the real challenges we have, this is both good and bad. As leaders, we have the challenge of figuring out how to lead our teams. So we have to be intensely schooled and ready to handle their objections and challenges along the way.
I agree. I also think it's really important if, let's say you're having this by this halfway in the year mark, 6 months into the year conversation, and it hasn't been a great 6 months for the company. Let's just pretend that, because that's going to happen. You need to address that once and only once. Really interested in what you have to say about this, Kevin, but I prefer, let's address that elephant in the room right away. Guys, this has been a really bad 6 months. This is what went wrong. We're going to have to talk about it. Let's just talk about it. But then let's say, now that is done. We can't change history. All we can do is affect the future. So let's stop talking about the past. And from that point on, we don't even talk about how we did in H1, the first half of the year, the first quarter, or whatever the case may be. And we only focus on how are we going to be successful from where we are today, accept where we're at, and how are we going to move forward and be successful from this point forward. So my preference is get that bad elephant, get him out of there, do him right away. Don't save him for the end, but I do know people that prefer that. So I'd be curious, Kevin, beginning, end, middle, where do you like to talk about the bad elephant?
I like to, it's like the way I start my days. I like to get the rough stuff done early. And there's a method, and this is my method, so I'm going to share one of my best practices, is I like to find an additional voice of encouragement after I've aired out the grievances or the challenge. So, for example, if it's been a bad quarter, first half of the year, month, whatever the time period, if it's been a bad time, say, this was tough. And you'll probably hear me say this a few times through the course of this podcast series, is you got to be the ship captain that's approaching a storm. This is bad. It's going to be uncomfortable, or it's been uncomfortable. Here's how we're going to get out of the choppy water here. Here's how we're going to improve. And then here's somebody else who's also been through that. I've used TED Talks. I've used training snippets. One thing I like to do as a best practice for a team, and we're running right up against the time here, so I'm going to leave some time for you here at 14 and a half minutes. I like to take a book with the number of chapters, a sales book with the number of chapters that equals me plus the team. So if there's 7 people on the team plus me, I like to find an 8-chapter book, and we all pre-read that and then teach each other in the meeting. That's the first module. That creates a platform of trust and the ability to teach each other going forward. It sets up the tone for improvement and growth. I love that model. So anything for you, Sean?
Yeah, I love that. That's a great idea. I wish I would have thought of that during some of my sales meetings in the past. I wish I knew you a long time ago, Kevin. I also like to, right after that bad news, because I'm kind of like you, let's eat the frog first thing in the morning, right? So the first thing that I want to do right after that is have something that's fun. So I want to transition. I want a big transition from life sucks, or it has sucked, to this is going to be great. So I try to do a big transition, that very first thing, get everybody excited and get everybody thinking and moving. And yes, we got this, and we're going to get them. We're gonna win. So go team, right? So I try to do something right away that's very encouraging, very big, maybe it's a new product we're going to introduce. Maybe it's something great that the company is going to be doing. Maybe it's something that we have to have a guest speaker to pump them up. Whatever the case may be, I want that right after that bad news so that there's a big delta there between bad news and good news. And the bad news here is we are out of time again. It's amazing how fast time goes when we're talking about these things. So I appreciate all of our audience out there listening. Kevin, why don't you round us out?
Like you said, Sean, we're appreciative of every listener we have. And if we had one encouragement, one thing you could do for us, share this with a friend. I bet there's somebody in your network who could benefit from having a little tidbit or trick to making their sales leadership more effective. With that, happy selling. Have a great week.
Thank you very much for attending this session on Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. We hope that we have been able to impart some wisdom, give you some guidance, give you some ideas to think about. If you do have other questions that you would like to ask, do us a favor, drop a note down in the comments, and so we can pick it up and we'll talk about it in a future episode. Thank you very much. Happy selling.